The grand hall of the palace was silent except for the echo of her voice. The young princess stood before her mother, her heart filled with confusion and anger. Her long gown touched the polished floor as she clenched her hands together, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. She had been told many things before, but nothing had shaken her as much as the news that she must marry a man from another world, a man she had never met. Mom, why do I have to marry a human? She cried out, her voice breaking in the vast golden chamber. The light from the tall chandeliers sparkled against the jewels in her crown, but she felt no joy in wearing them. To her, they were heavy chains of duty. Her mother, the queen, sat upon the high throne, her posture firm yet her eyes full of sorrow. She understood her daughter's pain, but she also knew the weight of responsibility. She did not answer right away. She let the silence fill the room, a silence that seemed to press down on the princess like a stone. Finally, she spoke in a soft but steady voice. My child, this is not only about you. This is about our people, our kingdom, our future. We need peace, and this marriage is the bridge that will keep it safe. The princess shook her head, her curls falling around her face. But why me? Why do I have to be the one to give up my freedom for peace? I do not even know him. How can I bind my life to a stranger? The queen's gaze did not falter. Because you are strong, because you are brave, and because you are my daughter. You have the power to carry this burden, even if it feels unfair. I wish I could take it from you, but this is the only path we have left. The princess turned away, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She looked at the golden walls and the tall windows where the night sky glowed with stars. Beyond those walls was the world she longed to explore freely, without duty holding her back. She dreamed of choosing her own path, of deciding her own heart. But those dreams felt like fragile glass, ready to shatter. Her steps echoed as she walked across the hall, her anger fighting with her sorrow. She wanted to scream, to tell her mother that she would not obey. Yet when she saw the tired lines on her mother's face, the weight of ruling etched deep into her, she felt her resolve weaken. Her mother had sacrificed much, and now it was her turn. Still, the thought of marrying someone she had never seen filled her with dread. In the quiet corner of the hall, she stopped and pressed her hand against the cold stone pillar. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the polished surface. She whispered to herself, "Why must my heart be the price for peace?" The queen rose from her throne and walked toward her. Her gown flowed like a river of emerald silk, and her crown caught the light of the chandeliers. She placed her hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. "One day you will understand, my child. Sometimes love is not found in the freedom we dream of, but in the choices we are brave enough to make." The princess did not reply. Her throat felt tight, and her words were lost. She only nodded faintly, though her heart screamed in protest. She wished for answers, for comfort, but all she felt was the cold shadow of duty surrounding her. That night, when she was alone in her chamber, she sat by the window and gazed at the stars. She wondered what kind of man this human was, what face he carried, what voice he spoke with. Would he be cruel or kind? Would he see her as more than a crown, more than a tool for peace? The questions spun in her mind, and no answer came. She held her knees close to her chest, like a child who wished to hide from the world. Far away in the darkness of the sky, ships were already preparing to bring the visitors. The man who would soon change her life was on his way, and she could not stop it. The thought made her heart race with fear, but also with a strange curiosity she did not understand. For now, she could only wait, trapped between the life she wanted and the duty she could not escape. The morning sun shone through the tall windows of the palace, painting the marble floors with gold. The princess had slept little the night before. Her thoughts had circled endlessly around the man she was told to marry. She tried to imagine his face, but her mind only gave her shadows. She tried to hear his voice, but the silence was all she knew. Her maids prepared her gown, a dress of soft green that shimmered in the light. She stood still as they worked, her mind far away. Today the ships were coming. Today she would meet the one chosen for her. Her chest felt heavy as though she carried a stone inside her heart. Outside, the courtyards were alive with soldiers, banners, and music. The air smelled of flowers placed in every corner, a false celebration that she could not feel. People gathered to welcome the visitors from afar, smiling and cheering, unaware of the storm that raged inside her. At last, the sound of engines filled the air. From the sky, the great ships descended slowly, shining like silver birds. The people gasped and pointed as the ships landed on the stone platforms outside the palace gates. The princess stood on the balcony beside her mother, her hands clasped tightly before her. She tried to keep her face calm, though her heart beat wildly. The doors of the largest ship opened, and from the shadows stepped men and women in neat uniforms. They looked strong, proud, and disciplined. Among them walked the boy chosen to be her suitor. His name was Daniel. He was not dressed like a prince, but his presence was steady and firm. His eyes scanned the palace grounds, not with arrogance, but with quiet respect. The queen welcomed the guests with warm words. The princess, however, kept her silence. She studied Daniel from a distance. He was tall, with dark hair that caught the sunlight. His face was calm, almost unreadable, yet his movements showed confidence without pride. She expected him to bow deeply or flatter her with words, but instead he met her gaze directly, neither shy nor bold, simply steady. "Add." When they were brought into the hall, the queen invited Daniel to step forward. He walked with care, not rushing, not dragging his feet. The princess watched every detail, searching for a reason to dislike him. She wanted to find arrogance, weakness, or selfishness, something that could justify her anger. But instead, she found none of these. Daniel bowed politely, his voice calm when he finally spoke. "It is an honor to stand in your hall. I am here with respect for your people, and I will do my best to honor the bond that is asked of me." The princess frowned. His words were simple, not grand. He did not try to charm her. He did not act as though he was above her. But somehow that made her feel even more unsettled. She had expected someone proud, someone who saw her as a prize. Instead, he spoke as though he was willing to stand beside her, not above her. Later, when the guests were given rooms, Daniel was invited to walk with the princess in the garden. She did not want to go, but her mother's gentle look left her no choice. The air outside was cool, the fountains sang, and the roses filled the path with fragrance. Daniel walked a step behind her at first, as though waiting for her to speak. She said nothing. He finally broke the silence. "I know this is not easy for you," he said softly. "It is not easy for me either. I did not choose this path, but I will walk it with honesty. I hope you can see me not only as the stranger I am today, but perhaps as something more tomorrow." The princess stopped, her heart jumping at his words. She turned to look at him. His face held no mockery, no false charm. He looked at her with eyes that seemed to carry both strength and kindness. She did not answer him, not yet. But for the first time, she felt her anger soften, if only a little. That night, as she sat alone in her chamber, she remembered his voice. She did not want to, but she did. She remembered how steady it sounded, how honest it seemed. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered, "Who are you really, Daniel? And why do I feel that you might not be what I feared?" Far outside, the ships rested quietly, and the palace glowed under the moonlight. A new chapter had begun, whether she was ready or not. The days that followed moved slowly for the princess. Each morning she woke to the sound of footsteps in the palace halls and the soft murmur of voices as preparations for the alliance continued. Everywhere she went, she felt the eyes of the court upon her, watching, waiting to see if she would accept her fate. She wished she could escape their gaze, but there was no place to hide. Daniel, however, seemed untouched by the heavy air of expectation. He carried himself with calm dignity, never rushing, never pushing himself upon her. When he joined her at meals, he spoke with courtesy, asking questions about her kingdom and listening with quiet interest. He never boasted of his achievements, though the soldiers whispered that he was a brave man who had faced danger many times. The princess did not know what to think of him. He was not what she had feared, yet that confused her even more. One afternoon, the queen asked her daughter to show Daniel the palace grounds. She agreed, though not with joy. She walked ahead, her gown sweeping over the marble floors, while Daniel followed at a respectful distance. They came to the training field where young guards practiced with swords. The sound of clashing steel filled the air. Daniel paused to watch, his eyes sharp. "Do you also train with them?" he asked. The princess lifted her chin. "Of course. Every child of the royal family learns to fight. You do not only sit on thrones. A faint smile touched his lips. Then perhaps you can teach me something. I would like to learn your ways. She looked at him with surprise. No suitor had ever asked such a thing. They had always sought to impress her, to show their own strength, never to learn from her. She felt a flicker of pride but quickly hid it. Perhaps another day, she said coldly, though in her heart she wondered what it would be like to spar with him. Later, they walked through the gardens where fountains sang and birds fluttered in the trees. The princess tried to ignore the silence between them, but it pressed heavily upon her. At last, she turned to him and asked, "Why did you agree to this marriage? You could have refused. You could have stayed with your own people." Daniel stopped and looked at her. His eyes were steady, his voice calm. "I did not agree for power or reward. I agreed because peace is worth more than pride. If my life can be a bridge to stop war, then it is a path I will walk. Even if it means leaving behind everything I know." His words unsettled her. She had expected him to speak of ambition, of glory, but instead he spoke of sacrifice. She did not answer, but his voice lingered in her mind as they continued their walk. That evening, the palace hosted a gathering where nobles and guests dined together. Music filled the hall, and candles glowed in golden holders. The princess sat beside her mother, listening as Daniel spoke with the courtiers. He was polite but firm, never allowing himself to be treated as less, yet never acting above others. The nobles who had doubted him began to look at him with new respect. As the music rose, couples moved to the floor to dance. The queen gave her daughter a gentle look, and before she could protest, Daniel stood and offered his hand. The princess hesitated, her heart racing, but the eyes of the court were upon her. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, and he led her to the floor. The dance was slow, the steps simple, yet her heart beat faster than ever before. She expected him to hold her tightly, but his touch was light, respectful, as though he carried not a princess, but something fragile. For the first time she allowed herself to meet his gaze, and what she saw there shook her. It was not ambition, not duty, but a quiet respect that made her cheeks burn. When the music ended, they stepped apart. The hall erupted in applause, but the princess heard nothing. She could only hear the sound of her own heartbeat. She returned to her seat with her thoughts in turmoil. That night, she sat again by the window of her chamber, staring at the stars. Daniel's words, his steady eyes, his gentle touch during the dance, all of it filled her mind. She wanted to push it away, to remind herself that this was not her choice, that it was duty, nothing more. But her heart whispered something different, something she did not yet understand. She pressed her hand to the glass and whispered into the night, "Why do I feel this way? Why does he not seem like a stranger anymore?" Far beyond the palace walls, shadows moved. Not everyone welcomed the peace that this union promised. In the darkness, plans were being made that would soon test both the princess and Daniel in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The palace glowed with music and laughter, but beneath the beauty of the evening, danger moved like a shadow. The queen had invited nobles and guests to celebrate the progress of peace. Candles burned in tall holders, the scent of flowers filled the air, and golden plates shimmered under the lights. To anyone watching, it looked like joy. But the princess could not escape the uneasy feeling that something dark was waiting. She sat at the long table, her mother beside her, and Daniel close enough that she could hear his calm voice when he spoke to others. He was polite, firm, and never afraid to stand his ground. She found herself watching him more often than she wished, her thoughts tangled with feelings she could not yet name. When the music paused and servants brought more wine, the hall grew quieter. That was when it happened. Sudden crash echoed as the tall doors burst open. Men dressed in black rushed inside, their faces hidden and their blades gleaming under the candlelight. Screams filled the hall as nobles fled from their seats. Guards rushed forward, but the intruders were fast and skilled. The princess froze for a heartbeat, her breath caught in her chest. Then she felt Daniel's hand push her back, his body stepping in front of her like a shield. His eyes were sharp, his voice steady. "Stay behind me." Chaos erupted.
Us.
Swords clashed, shouts rang out, and the smell of smoke filled the room as one of the intruders threw a torch into the curtains. Flames licked upward, spreading across the wall. The princess tried to run toward her mother, but one of the attackers blocked her path. He raised his blade, his eyes cold and merciless. Before the blade could fall, Daniel lunged forward, caught the attacker's arm, twisted it, and forced the weapon to the ground. The fight was rough, every movement sharp and fast. The princess watched in shock as Daniel fought not with elegance but with raw courage, his every strike meant to protect. "Go," he shouted to her, but her feet would not move. She could not leave him. The intruder broke free and swung again, but Daniel blocked the strike with his forearm, blood running down his sleeve. With a final push, he knocked the man to the floor and turned back to the princess. Her heart pounded. "You're hurt, I'll live," he said quickly. "But we must get you out." Together, they moved through the smoke and chaos, Daniel leading her toward the queen. Guards had surrounded her mother, but the attackers pressed hard, trying to break through. It became clear that the intruders had not come for treasure or power. They had come for her. "They want you," Daniel said, his voice low but certain. The princess's blood ran cold. She had never felt so exposed, so fragile. But Daniel's hand tightened around hers, steadying her. They fought their way through the hall, dodging flames and blades, until at last the guards gained control. The intruders were captured or slain, their plot broken, though the damage to the hall was great. When the final cry faded and silence returned, the princess stood trembling, her hand still in Daniel's. She looked at him, at the blood on his arm, the cuts on his face, and the unshaken strength in his eyes. He had risked his life for her without hesitation. He had stood between her and death, not because he was ordered to, but because he chose to. Her mother came to her side, her voice shaken but strong. "See now, my daughter? This is why he was chosen. Not for his title, not for his wealth, but for his courage." The princess could not speak. Her throat was tight, her mind spinning. She looked again at Daniel, remembering how he had thrown himself into danger for her. She had doubted him, resisted him, even feared him. But now, standing in the smoke of a hall that still burned, she felt something shift inside her heart. That night, after the fires were put out and the palace grew quiet again, the princess returned to her chamber. She touched the window glass, cool under her fingers, and whispered to herself, "He saved me. He chose me." For the first time, she began to understand what her mother had meant. Peace was not only made by laws and crowns, it was made by trust, by courage, and by those willing to fight for one another. And now, she wondered, could her heart truly belong to the man she once swore she would never accept? The palace stood quiet after the storm. Days passed, yet the memory of the attack still lingered in the air like smoke. The walls had been cleaned, the broken glass replaced, and the fires put out, but the fear and the questions remained. Who had sent those men, and how deep did the betrayal inside the kingdom run? No answer came quickly, but one truth was clear. Daniel had saved the princess, and the bond between them could no longer be ignored. The princess walked through the gardens one evening, her gown brushing against the grass. As the sky turned orange with the setting sun, she heard footsteps behind her, and knew who it was before she turned. Daniel followed at a distance, his arm still wrapped in a bandage from the fight. He walked with the same calm steps as always, yet something had changed between them. She stopped and faced him. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. "You could have run. You could have left me to the guards, but you stood in front of me. You bled for me." Daniel's eyes met hers, because it was the right thing to do, because your life is worth more than mine. "And because, though I did not choose this path, I will not walk it without honor." His words struck her heart like a quiet bell. She searched his face, hoping to find pride or false charm, but there was none. His honesty was as steady as his steps, unshaken even by danger. In the days that followed, the princess saw him more clearly. She noticed the way he treated the servants with respect, never speaking to them as though they were less. She noticed how he spoke with the children of the palace, bending down to hear their small voices and laughing with them as though they were equals. She saw him training with the guards, not to show off, but to learn, to grow, to understand her people. The court began to whisper. Some nobles who had doubted him now spoke of his courage. Others still resisted, bitter that a man without title or crown would soon stand beside the princess. Yet the queen remained firm. She had seen the truth with her own eyes, and she knew her daughter must now make the final choice. One evening, the queen called her daughter to the throne room. The air was heavy, filled with the eyes of the council and the nobles. Daniel stood nearby, silent but steady. The queen's voice carried through the hall. "My daughter, you have seen what kind of man stands before you. You know the danger that still threatens us, and you know the promise that peace can bring. This choice is no longer only mine, it is yours. Will you take his hand, not as duty, but as your own will?" The hall grew silent. All eyes turned to the princess. Her heart pounded as she looked at Daniel. She remembered the fear in the burning hall, the warmth of his hand holding hers, the strength in his voice. She remembered his honesty in the garden, his laughter with the children, his respect for every person he met. She stepped forward, her voice clear, though her hands trembled. "I will not marry because I am forced. I will not marry because of duty alone. I will marry because I choose. And today I choose him." Gasps rose in the hall, followed by murmurs, but the queen's face softened with pride. Daniel's eyes widened for a moment, then a quiet smile touched his lips. He bowed his head, not in victory, but in gratitude. The ceremony was simple, yet filled with meaning. Bells rang through the palace as the people gathered to witness it. The princess wore a gown of white, her crown shining like morning light. Daniel stood beside her, dressed in formal robes given by the court. When their hands met, the hall filled with cheers, not of duty, but of hope. As they spoke their vows, the princess felt a peace she had never known. She no longer asked why she had to marry a human. She no longer saw Daniel as a stranger. She saw him as her choice, her partner, her bridge between two worlds. When the vows were sealed and the hall erupted with joy, the princess looked at him and whispered, so only he could hear, "You are no longer the stranger I feared. You are the man I was meant to find." Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his voice low but steady. "And you are no longer the duty I feared. You are the woman I was meant to protect." That night, as the stars shone over the palace, the kingdom stood united. The fears of yesterday faded, replaced by hope for tomorrow. And in the heart of the princess, love had finally taken root, not born from command, but from courage and choice.